Hello, my name is Kate Hudson Hall, and thank you for listening to Bulimia Sucks, because we know it does. Now, this is a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on bulimia and anorexia and other eating disorders. And episodes include personal stories of where people are now and their difficult journeys and their steps taken into recovery, and also to family members that have had a sibling or a child or even a parent that has had an eating disorder, and also to professionals who work with people with eating disorders. Now, my audiobook, Bulimia Sucks, is now live on Audible and Amazon and iTunes. And if you'd be interested and you'd like a free copy, then please email me at katehudsonhall@gmail.com, and I will send you the specific code so you can download it for free. So just email me. And also the Bulimia Sucks digital pack, which I'm very excited about, has now launched. And this is a program that's designed to show you how to begin to take those steps forward in your recovery. And what is included is 8+ hours of video content, the PDF form of my book Bulimia Sucks, also a hypnosis MP3 download to help you to move forward, and a family of friends support ebook download, and a relaxation recording for the times when you're feeling maybe anxious or stressed or whatever it may be, and also access to the private Facebook group for ongoing support, and then regular Facebook live Q&A sessions with myself. So if you would be interested and wanted to find out more, so if you go to bulimiasucks.com, all the information is in there. Now, I'm very excited. Our guest today is Joanne Light. And Joanne has a doctorate in counseling and education. She is certified in coaching and emotional intelligence training. And after 30+ years in education as a teacher, counselor, and higher education administrator, she decided to create a retirement career in coaching, working as a parent empowerment coach. I love that. Working with families, helping them navigate through their life's daily parenting challenges that probably many of us have had in the past, or maybe even going through. Yeah. And Joanne provides support to parents, enabling them to discover what it is they need and how to get there. I love that, because it's great. You may know what you need, but it's how are you going to take those steps forward to get there? And her mission is to guide parents in transforming their journey so they have more joy, feel more positive about themselves as parents, and raise resilient and compassionate children. Ooh, amazing. And Joanne also has a free download, and it's called How to Put the Joy Back into Parenting and Reduce Your Parental Guide in 5 Simple Steps. Oh, we want to hear more about that and how we can download it, but we will put the link anyway below. And so Joanne is here today to share her and her daughter's story of her eating disorders journey. So welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Kate. Happy to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. This is fabulous to have you on. So where to begin? Oh, now, so tell us, so you've got 2 daughters, is that right?
Right. I do have a third child, a son. So,
oh, a son.
But he's younger. He was younger.
So he was
The
younger.
daughters are the crux of this story, I think.
Yes.
It led to some of his issues as well. It's never ending, but
Yeah.
yes, I have two daughters who are now adults.
And it was just one of your daughters that had an eating disorder.
That's correct.
And was that the eldest or the?
No,
So that was
my middle child. She's younger than her by 3 years of her
right.
sister.
And so, Joanne, so when were you first aware that she had issues around food and
Food.
eating and?
I think Em was about, she had entered high school. It was probably the end of her freshman year, beginning of sophomore year. It was very clear that she just wasn't eating enough and was very uptight when it came to food and would move her food around the plate and have many excuses for her eating. And Em was a very bright, driven young woman, and she didn't seem depressed. She just wasn't eating enough and got thin. And in the estimation of the culture she was part of and that was happening at the time, she looked fabulous. So it was very, I was frightened, and fear is I think a tremendous obstacle for parents today. And your fear really, and your anxiety over what might happen is overwhelming, and is one of the things that I think as parents we all have to face and deal with. But then I realized that there were certain things I could control and certain things I couldn't control.
Right.
And she was old enough to eat without my forcing her food or not forcing her food. And all I could do was control my reactions. So I tried to be supportive, but also engaging in talking about it, which she was not apt to do as a 16 or 17-year-old. She also has an older sister. This might be interesting background, Kate, to the story,
Yeah.
who, when she hit high school, in the middle of her first year, decided that all this studying and being good at all these things, whether it be singing or getting good grades or hanging out with the right crowd, didn't appeal. And she went in the other direction. She hung out with, you might want to call the wrong crowd. They were the kids who were more missed skipping classes and smoking weed and not necessarily following the conforming kind of path. It wasn't a linear path for Alex. And she had a lot of anxiety, but I believe that her sister, that Emily, who suffered with the eating disorder, watched her older sister and said, whoa, she's causing a lot of angst in the whole family. And when one child is not doing something or dealing with an issue, it affects the entire atmosphere.
Yeah, the
the
dynamics and the whole family.
Exactly right. You're right. Dynamics is the word. And that played into Emily's deciding, well, I think I'm just going to be perfect and do everything right. And part of that for her was being the perfect female adolescent. She was going to be thin. She was going to get all A's. She was going to have the great loyal friends, the right friends. She had a boyfriend who was a really good kid. He was pretty perfect too. And she skated through high school being, everyone looked up to her. All the girls wanted to eat carrots and yogurt for lunch the way Emily was doing. So it was very hard to convince her that something was up. I did find a therapist who was schooled in eating disorders, and I quote unquote made her go. But therapy, as you well know, and people out there know, if you're not really ready to do it and it's not a driving force in your inner self and in your heart, you might do it, but you're not necessarily gaining anything. I think seeds were planted, but nothing really changed. And it was hard. It was hard as a parent. I I resorted to trying to be patient and understanding, to crazy things like she would request non-fat cottage cheese or non-fat whatever on the when she added to the shopping list. I'd get home and buy full fat cottage cheese, save the non-fat container, and pour the full fat cottage cheese into the non-fat container. Now, I remember feeling, well, I'm being dishonest and I'm not being authentic, but I didn't know what else to do. I felt that she needed more calories. So I tried silly things like that to change the dynamic. But when you have an eating disorder, it's not just calories in and calories out, which is such a foolish, I think, approach to eating and obesity and all things societal. But she decided that she was going to be that perfect kid in every way. And she reflects even back on this as that's what girls were supposed to do. They should be thin, they should be smart, but not smarter than all the boys. Not too outspoken. Maybe she was a funny kid, but not too outspoken. Your female voices, I feel still to this day, especially this is 20 years ago, a little less, not too loud, not obstreperous, don't speak up too often, just find your little niche and go along. And society rewarded that. That was the culture for girls, for young girls. And it was a rough go. It was very difficult. You worried. I would wake up in the night worrying, what if she gets, what if her hair falls out? What if she gets really, really sick? She could die. What is going on? Now, she never got so thin that, she looked like a Holocaust survivor. It didn't quite look like that. And you see, even women, I see grown-up women today who's so thin that they look ill. She didn't ever look really, really sick. But by her senior year, she sort of flipped.
What does that mean?
I'd say that she had spent these years trying to be perfect, and she was getting ready to go off to college. Did very well in getting into college, and she just got jaded, just tired. And she gained some weight, which was good, but seemed depressed. I think finally she seemed, the depression kind of hit. But she went off to school and had a pretty decent first year. I think went back to the finding people who were going to be like her and watch what they eat and talk about what they eat and, be part of that. But then I think by sophomore year, she almost got what I think she considered fat and depressed and unable to function on a daily basis. And taking all those advanced literature English classes was just not working anymore. And she called us and said, I can't do this anymore. And it was, I think she was 19 at the time, Kate. And it was such, I was totally freaked out because, oh my God, she's going to drop out of school. You worry about the incorrect things. Oh my God, we're going to have to go get her. We're going to have to talk to her. Is she going to she'll drop out of school? Like that would be, parents today get so worried about things that are irrelevant in certain circumstances. So we worried, oh my God, she's going to drop out of school, all that tuition, she will get behind. She's going to lose her ambition, it was crazy. And when we saw her, she was just kind of a mess. And we spent, I think it took a couple of months before we found a program that was appropriate. But as I looked back on it, her deciding that it was time to change, that she needed to do something about it, that she couldn't live that way anymore under that pressure of looking in a certain way and being a certain way and not being her authentic self. That was such a wonderful breakthrough. I'm not sure I saw it that way initially.
Yeah.
Certainly, I can just say to all parents, you can move your children towards something. And when they have a mental health issue like this, be vigilant and try to be supportive, but they, at least with eating disorders, you have to decide you're ready to recover.
Absolutely. I remember when I had bulimia for 15 years, and I just must have put my brother says, my mother's no longer here, but my brother said that I put my mother through quite a lot of difficulty. And because it was such a long time ago, and I do refer to the 1800s, it was a long time ago. There was no help as such out there. Nobody was really aware because it was in the 80s. And the only thought that my mother ever had was knowing about Karen Carpenter and how she, you know, ended up with, you know, having anorexia and then eventually ended up dying. That was her only sort of view on it, because there wasn't any details out there.
That's
and
right.
So I know that my mother, she did approach me a number of times to try and talk to me about my eating disorder, and for a long time I was just in denial, and I remember I got very angry when she tried to speak to me about it. I just wasn't ready, and that's the difficulty. But with the knowledge that we have now and the help that's out there, there weren't many books when I had my eating disorder, and I remember I did manage to find one book, but it was more of an academic book, and so it was very difficult for me at that time to read anyway, because of where my head was. So there wasn't any help,
right?
And that was just, so difficult. So at least now there is some help out there for parents, but I can't imagine.
We had a difficult time finding the right help. It wasn't easy, and this was in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was 2002 maybe that she finally, we found a program, but the programs were far and few between. You'd think all these wonderful, great hospitals, at least in the USA. I don't know what was going on in Britain at the time. It wasn't seen as something that should be focused on, because
I did a podcast.
Sort of, what was expected. Girls, that's a good thing. Girls should be thin, and I think Karen Carpenter's death made people, at least, her legacy was that she at least made people aware that this was a real illness.
And then there was Princess Diana, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And that was when people started to sort of wake up to bulimia, I think, and how incredible it was for her to speak out about that. She
was very brave. Anyone who speaks out about their mental health issue, I think, is a daring, brave person. Mm-hmm.
I did write I'm still waiting to hear from Prince William. I have written to Prince William and asked him to come on the podcast. So I'm actually waiting for him to reply. I sent him a copy of my book as well. So hopefully, because I'd like him to come on and talk about his how he feels about how his mother spoke out about her bulimia. So we'll look forward to that.
That's a great plan. I look forward to hearing about it.
Yeah, so do I. And so at least now there is some help out there. But in the early 2000s, I had Carolyn Costin on, and she was the first person to set up a residential program in the States in the 90s, and that's Monte Nido.
Where was that program? I'm not familiar.
It's called Monte Nido, and it was in Malibu. In Malibu, yeah. And then I think they have
in California, yeah.
And they have them dotted around now. There's one in New York, apparently. But yeah, so that was a really interesting story when she was on, to hear. So she's been sort of helping people for such a long time.
That's great.
Fascinating, yeah. So, but there obviously wasn't many residential places when you were looking.
No, we we wound up at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland, but MGH, the Boston hospitals really had nothing that was significant or consequential at the time. They all do now, which is great. I think it's much more recognized. But I think also at the time that we dealt with it, there were certainly some young men and boys who suffered with anorexia, but it because it was mostly girls. I think that, I'm not saying this from a sexist viewpoint, but okay, that's what girls should look like. Not that they should be sick, but that was the ideal look. It's like how many, and today, the young girls, how many likes can you get? How do you Photoshop or do whatever to look perfect, to look exactly what the image is out there? And my daughter, Emily, projected that image and lived up to it. She really, in her heart, she felt that was what she needed to do.
And the right, pressure that the pressure that she must have put on herself to strive to be
right,
perfect.
None of us is perfect, and no parent is perfect, but you certainly have to try to regulate those emotions and try to pass on, the best possible scenario for your kids. But it's hard, it's hard for, you worry about the most tangential things when your child is suffering, and they're in denial. So your mother worried probably about 1,000 things that, really weren't really directly affecting how you were, handling your eating disorder. And eating disorder, I mean, that's kind of a stigmatized term. Not, I don't think so much anymore. No. And the bulimia is really a sad piece of it. Emily always said to me, Mom, later, she said, if I didn't hate throwing up so much, I definitely would have added bulimia to the whole, to the package. She just ate and felt depressed, and but she knew girls who they had parties, bulimia parties.
My gosh.
People, we just don't know what goes on out there, It's very difficult. I don't know now. Is that helpful? What more do you need?
Absolutely. So she went on the program, and then what happened after that?
She was there, I think it was about 4 to 6 weeks, came home and spent what turned out to be a semester at home with follow-up therapy and psychotherapy, that I think was helpful. And she would write about the stories about what it was like to be at Hopkins and what the daily routine was like. It was a locked unit. I remember going down there like 3 or 4 times, and it was a whole serious thing. They really had I don't know if that's how they handle it now. I'm not so familiar, but it was a very serious approach. And she did fine when she was home. She took some class, and she wound up going, but she was bound and determined to go back to college, to the University of Pennsylvania, and complete her degree. She just was a semester or so late. And they were very good about having her come back. I don't know what I think the university counseling centers are pretty aware of these issues. And this, even though it was, some years ago, they were happy to have her back. She had to provide medical evidence that she had taken care of it, and she had to promise to go to counseling on campus a certain number of times in a given week. So I think, it became I became more confident that we were getting the help we needed. It's very hard as a parent to ask for help. You think you can do it,
Yeah, absolutely. And so, gosh, it must have been such a difficult time for you. What was the most difficult?
I think the most difficult was watching her and being in denial, and I think realizing that I was a little bit in denial as well. I thought, okay, I'm trying to make it different, but maybe I just have to accept this. It wasn't, it wasn't, I just wasn't totally admitting that this was a serious problem. It seemed like, okay, this is something that makes me uncomfortable and makes me scared, but I think it took me a while to face it head on. I think she and I were both in very different ways in denial.
So what brought you to the point where you thought, right, now I've actually got to understand and listen now?
I think I learned that I had to understand and listen and not feel that I could control it, that I couldn't control it. I could only control how I dealt with myself in relation to it, and tried to tamp down my fear and raise up my listening and my being there for her, and acknowledging the problem. But her acknowledging the problem, and I'm sure all the people, Kate, that you have on your show who've been through this, I'm sure most of them say it was only when I was ready. It's, any mental health issue, when you are in denial about it, if you're depressed and living day to day non-functioning, it's only when you're ready to do something about it that you and reach out for help seriously, that help can be had. So I think it was scary for me to just realize I was in denial to a point, and maybe should have done something sooner. Not sure what that something was. It's my daughter always says to me, I don't think there was anything different you could have done, is how she describes it to me today. But as a parent, the guilt, of course, that guilt trap. I should have done this, or I could have tried that. We took her to, there was a program in Cambridge, Massachusetts in the evenings, and my husband and I would drive to Cambridge and sit in the car and wait for her to come back from, it was a group.
Right.
I mean, we did these things, but it didn't really make a huge impact.
Because she wasn't ready.
Exactly. She was doing it because we said, you got to do this, this, look at you, you need some help, and we want to offer it to you. But that didn't change that you can't, it was a helpless kind of feeling. It was a scary, helpless kind of feeling. And I definitely empathize and feel for parents who have kids with this issue. So please, moms and dads, look for it, look for signs,
Yeah. And I think what's really important is that if you do think that your child has an eating disorder, to hop on the internet and find out as much information as you can about that. So you will have some knowledge about how, what's going on, and maybe have some more insight into how you can approach your loved one.
Yes. And to ask for professional help early on. I mean, if you think your 10-year-old is showing signs of problems with food, any kind of irrational kind of, like I can't eat that, and my friends don't eat that, and I'm afraid to eat this, or I won't, I totally forbid. I think parents need to immediately seek guidance, as you said, be it the internet, their pediatrician, all the experts out there. There are many more psychotherapists who really are quite trained and able to help, guide you through, and keep an eye on what they're doing on the internet, because they have little groups, what did you eat today? What didn't you eat? Why do you feel it's important? because our relationship to food can be skewed very early on, very early on. I mean, my daughter has a little girl now who's about 17 months old. And I went one day, I said, "Oh, look at those thighs. She's so cute." She said, "Do not ever say that to my daughter. That's language that will not be allowed in my household." It's, so there's definitely stuff that she has definitely absorbed and will pass along. So it's a lifelong issue. I remember growing up and I had a sister who was overweight, and my mother did nothing but nag her, nothing but nag, nag, nag. So I think I came to parenting with this image that fat was really not a good thing, that girls shouldn't be fat. So I think there's, you parent how you parent. It's in your DNA how you were parented, and you have to consciously decide to dig deep and do the work to not to not replicate everything that you were given or taught. I don't know if that makes sense. But
yeah, absolutely.
when I deal with parents, I think that's the hardest thing for them, is to realize that they have to think about where they came from and what happened to them in their childhoods, because it definitely affects what you do with your kids.
Yes, because you have no guidance. So you think, well, this is the way to do it because that's how I was brought up. And then, maybe the husband has will have a different view on how to bring up a child. So then it's sitting down, and thinking and talking about it and saying, okay, well, this is what you think and this is what I think, because this is how we were brought up. So how, let's do some research and find out maybe what would be the best way to do that.
Right.
Because otherwise we just naturally flow with the way we were brought up.
Right. And if you say, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. I definitely won't do that." You have to really figure out what, quote, that was, Kate, in order to change how you do. And sometimes, I remember several times in the course of raising the three of them that I'd say, "Oh my God, I sound like my mother."
So many people say that.
We cannot do that again. We mustn't do that, because I was brought up in a generation, my parents didn't know much about what I was doing, and it's not that they didn't care, they just didn't know what else to do. It was very hands off. And, but it wasn't as scary a world because the internet did not exist. And that definitely makes it much harder for young parents today.
Yes, absolutely. It can be a very positive thing, us talking about looking at research, but on the other hand, for the young people, they can research maybe areas that would be very negative to them.
Right.
But it's guiding them towards only looking at the positive.
Exactly.
And how they can get that help.
For sure.
Yeah. So what would you say, Joanne, to other parents? Maybe they are thinking that their child has an eating disorder. What would you say to them?
Well, this is going to sound pretty harsh, Kate. I would say that if they're suspecting that their child is not eating well or has maybe some mental issue related to food, that of course they reach out for help. But first of all, to look at themselves. What are they modeling? Are they, and can their children hear them talking to friends about, "Oh, well, we can't go there. I can't eat that," or "I'm only going to have a half portion." I think it's amazing when a group of women get together, somehow what they do eat and what they don't eat and how much they're exercising becomes a pretty pervasive tone and topic. So I suggest that all mothers of particularly girls who are 10, 11, and 12 is to look in the mirror and see what you look like and decide if you are appropriately modeling what you look like and the foods you serve and how much you harp on, well, you really shouldn't eat that, or you should eat this. It sounds
absolutely. And do you make, sorry, and also, maybe looking at yourself, and do you make comments about how you look?
Constantly, probably.
Absolutely.
"Oh, this dress makes me look fat." It's
as simple as that.
It
And that
is.
is not helpful if somebody is consistent, a child is consistently hearing that.
Right.
And it's setting seeds for maybe for many negative behaviors connected to
Dangerous
food.
behaviors. It's really, if you can teach your children a good relationship to food, it's hard. It's very hard, but parents, particularly those moms, need to take a look at what they're doing. Are they, putting on their leggings and working out excessively? I mean, it just is a model. Our kids watch us so carefully, even as teenagers. People think teenagers don't pay attention, but they do. And you are the most important model for them. And I really don't remember back then if I was a bad model in terms of what I looked like, but I know that I would think about going on a diet or talk about going on a diet probably more often than I should have. It
Right.
just was there. People need to think about what they're portraying to. I mean, you can't think about everything. You can't filter everything that comes out of your mouth.
No.
But you can be
But start to be
aware,
aware.
self-aware.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the children are picking up, not only hearing it, but they're also picking up the unconscious patterns
Right.
And behaviors of the parent.
Totally. All the time.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough. So I think my advice is twofold. Ask for help. Try to read about it, like you said, to learn what it might be and how it manifests itself, but certainly to look at one's own behavior.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. But when I think back, my mother, well, that was probably part of the problem. She was always very slim, but not because she would, restrict her food, but that was her metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my that's how I imagined that I would be. And I suppose when I got to 18, I was a late developer, so I was always like stick thin. And then when I got to 17, 18, I became a bit more, voluptuous maybe. But no, I was still, slimish. But to me, I looked really different. And that was like, oh my God, what's going to happen here? And I think that's kind of like a strain of where I ended up where I did.
Yeah. It's easy to fall into it. It's pretty easy, I think, to fall into. And I don't know how many get undiagnosed and people just kind of live with that indefinitely. I that's kind of scary too.
Yeah.
But kids are listening, they're watching and listening. So it's hard, but we need to be aware of the things that we say and do.
Yes. And that's a big learning for everybody here today. So Joanne, tell us about the download.
I talk about burnout and putting the joy back into parenting and the things you can do, the steps that you can take to make it to eliminate some of the anxiety. So learning when to, first of all, let go of certain things. When you have expectations, is to moderate and deal with them. Self-regulate. I mean, our kids, especially our teens, because I often deal with teens, their emotional states we know are very roller coaster, but you can help your child and teach your kids to have emotional balance if you have it. If you have learned to regulate your emotions, if you can work on not yelling and screaming and lecturing and showing up for your kids. I think asking for help is one of the steps that I constantly hound parents on, because it's okay. Don't go alone. Somebody might give you a helping hand that will turn out to be a wonderful, wonderful thing for you. And also self-care. I can't emphasize that enough. You have to have some self-compassion and take care of yourself. It's really hard to do your best for your kids. We all want the best for our children, every parent. And everybody has different circumstances that affect that. But taking care of oneself, however you choose to do that. Is it going for a massage? Is it having tea with a friend? Whatever, taking 15 minutes of meditation a day, even 5. Just
Making sure you have
oneself.
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure that you have that time for you.
Yes.
If it
Because
is,
when you
even if it is
sacrifice
only 5
everything for
minutes.
everybody, it
Yeah.
doesn't work. You run out. You lose steam.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to refuel.
You need to refuel. Yeah.
I love
Ask for
that.
help, refuel, take a look at oneself.
Yeah.
Those are some of the steps.
Oh, lovely. And, another good idea I just came to mind is to, do some research on the internet about teenagers and their hormones. Because
Right.
if you understood it a little more, you might find it a bit easier to deal with it, because it's like a roller coaster, isn't it? They're up and
It
down
is.
and
And
firing.
it's their brain development. Teenagers, I love teens. They get a bad rap. They're not all, I mean, and my own daughter was a risk-taking, impossible teen in many ways, but that's what their brains are doing. They're pruning, they're getting, only setting up the things that they're interested in, and therefore they have to explore. So you have to create an environment for that developing teenage brain. And just remember that emotional piece of their brain, the amygdala, is way more powerful than their prefrontal cortexes, which regulate and are rational, but they can be very rational, insightful human beings. And I say, talk to the side that's rational. Don't emphasize the irrational, risky side of them. They're moody, and just learn to live with it. Learn to just show up and listen. And don't, I try to tell parents, no lecturing, Kate. How you just, oh, you're late. Do you know what could happen to you? And this happened, and that, and then you go on and on and on, and you lose them. They're not really listening. But if you say, gee, this made me very frightened that you were late tonight, and you broke curfew. We have set some limits. Let's talk about this tomorrow. Take a breath. Stand back, stand down. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah. I think that's great advice, to actually step back and think,
try to.
Okay, I'm
And
very
you're right.
emotional about this right now. I need to step away, and we'll talk about it tomorrow when you calm down, when everybody's calmed down.
Research the teenage brain. It's fascinating. It really is fascinating.
Yeah.
They're super learners. They can learn so much.
Yeah.
It's great.
So great. So we'll put a link to the download.
Okay.
On below the podcast, so everybody can find it.
Wonderful. That's great.
Yeah.
And anyone who wants to get in touch with me, I'd be happy to chat.
Yeah. So what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, if the download will lead them to the gift, which will lead them to signing on to my email list, and hearing from me. But they can also, I love to get emails just out of the blue, and my email address, I think I sent to you as well. It's Joanne at joannehlight.com.
Yes,
And
we'll put that
if
on
somebody
there.
emails me with a question, I'd be happy to try to address their concern and chat.
Oh,
Always happy to help.
Fabulous, Joanne. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yes, it's been very insightful. Very insightful to hear a parent's view on such a difficult time in your life for both of you.
It's very hard. I feel their pain and know that it's something to be reckoned with. It's not a simple, easy fix.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Joanne.
You're very welcome, Kate. I hope this was helpful.
Absolutely. So thank you.
Thanks.
And I was just thinking that within the Bulimia Sucks digital pack, there is a download for parents and family members to get some helpful ideas and tips of how to approach somebody with an eating disorder, and maybe guide them towards that first step onto recovery. So if anybody would be interested, they could email me at katehudsonhall@gmail.com, and I could send you just the PDF with that information on, just to help you.
I encourage all the parents to do that.
Yeah.
Even if you don't suspect that this is an issue for your family, it's good to have background information
Yes.
and
Yes.
to know what to look for. That's great that you do that. It's a wonderful thing you do.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you. So that's all for today's episode of Bulimia Sucks. And join us for the next episode, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes so you never miss an episode. And as I mentioned earlier, check out my book also, which is on Amazon, called Bulimia Sucks, to learn many different techniques to help you to begin to break through your painful bulimic behaviors. And I'd love to hear what you think. So leave me a review. So thank you to listening. And before we go, let us know what you think, and then show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Buzzsprout or Apple iTunes or wherever you listen to it. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you in the next episode.